I quit smoking after 22 years, last October. And I sneaked myself into it. I tested not smoking for a weekend, another day, another day, another day, and then I kept not smoking. One effect is cool, like not being addicted anymore. One effect was totally unexpected. I basically got into a really, really bad depression. I couldn't access joy anymore. My confidence was gone. It took about 2 weeks after the not smoking, and I didn't connect it at first. I have studied a lot of brain science, but I wasn't aware of nicotine being a continual dopamine source for your brain. So I had no problem not smoking cigarettes in lots of situations where I was used to smoking before, but my brain was used to that stuff, and it still is. So even after 3 months, it's still rare that I sleep through a full night without waking up afraid of something. The flip side, positive flip side of that, is that the overall intensity of everything in my life has increased by an order of magnitude I can't even put into words. So my sensitivity for anything, my listening capability has increased. I sense stuff that I didn't sense before. But it's also like when you wake up at night, you start like, and then you think like, oh, why am I so stupid? Why don't I sleep? And then you think, oh, I still could use 2 hours. And all of these thoughts going on in your brain. And the level of mindfulness I've achieved in going through this, learning to breathe, learning to attune myself to the situation, learning to accept all of these fears. And it got me to rethink stuff that I talked about before. Vulnerability, right? Cool. Every man can easily be talking about vulnerability and about courage, things like that. So the funny thing that happened was that this smoking addiction and getting rid of that and working through the stuff in my brain actually transformed into something quite awesome. So the insights I got, the actual feeling of being on a tightrope, I've never actually done this, but it feels like that. And I've talked about this before, right? About you maybe remember the trust experiment when I went independent 1.5 years ago, and I felt very courageous. And a friend recently told me, like, you've put away so much fear. Apparently now you need to kind of pay it back. So I've left my comfort zone of being employed, of being safe, of knowing where my rent is going to come from. I had this courage, I had this trust, and I have really, really, really experienced so much magic. A lot of that with people who are in the room, or with people who are part of this community. So, liberation is something that sounds so simple, liberating power of vulnerability. But to actually go through things that you've done in your life and rethink the choices that you made. To think about change in this matrix metaphor, right? Having the awareness something is wrong, we're pretending, being offered choices, red and blue, right? There's 2 paths. There's the blame, judgment, shame, fear, silence, fitting in, right? That's going back into the matrix. Keep pretending. We're all okay. Our organization is not so bad. Our processes still work. Or the other individual stands like, I followed the process, done everything I can. Or taking the courageous route, right? Being vulnerable. Looking at what's really there. Looking at the dark bits that make us afraid. And then, you talked about overcoming fear. Going forward. Being with it. In case you don't know this lady, Brené Brown, she's been talking about vulnerability, writing about vulnerability, especially her new book, Daring Greatly, is highly recommended. One of the 2 best books I read last year. being aware of that we are valuable, that we are special, that we deserve to be happy, and that we deserve to think about why, right? The things that we have achieved, the choices we've made. Do you remember how the Matrix movie ends? The most important thing is actually at the end of movie 3, which you only experience when you survive all the long battles in between. When Neo fights Mr. Smith, and there are 100 Mr. Smiths, and he keeps fighting, and he knows he can't win. And Mr. Smith asks him, why do you keep fighting? And he says, because I made a choice. When I'm in my power, when I'm at my best, I feel like I can fly. I feel connected to everybody I know. I feel connected to all the knowledge that I've acquired, to all the great things that I've done. And I very often don't feel that way. And I have become more aware of that. And I've learned a lot about attention, about awareness, about seeing into parts of myself that I wasn't aware of before. I started calling this exquisite attention, because I learned that I can share this with others, that can help you see into the things that scare you and the people I work with. And that's a lovely, lovely, good side of this, still being very afraid very often. So I invite you to make courageous choices by looking at the dark bits, looking at what scares you, and integrating that, accepting that, and allowing this vulnerability to make you free.